Well, this is interesting. Ukraine's asking for a ceasefire, but at the same time, they seem to want a lot more weapons.
Yeah, it's
It's like they're trying...
it's real politics. Zelensky's trying to work every angle to get what he wants.
Yeah, for sure. So to catch everyone up, Zelensky's been on this whirlwind tour of Europe trying to drum up support for Ukraine, London, Paris, Rome, Berlin. He's really been racking up the frequent flyer miles.
Well, he's on a tight schedule. Every day counts.
Yeah, what's the big rush?
Well, there's a few things. First, Russia's been making some gains, slowly but still.
Yeah.
Second winter's coming, and that always favors the defenders.
Right.
And of course, the U.S. election is right around the corner. And
Yeah.
depending on who wins, that could mean big changes for U.S. support of Ukraine. Zelensky wants to lock in those weapons pledges before anything changes.
Makes sense. And to make things even tougher for him, that big Ramstein meeting where all the countries coordinating military aid to Ukraine usually get together. Well, that got canceled because of Hurricane Milton. Now he has to go hat in hand to each country individually.
Exactly. Which is why this list of demands he's bringing to these meetings is so interesting.
Demands is a strong word.
Well, that's how Politicos describe them.
Yeah.
5 key things he wants from the rest.
Okay, lay it on me. What's he asking for?
Well, first up, he wants a clear path to joining NATO.
Is that even realistic? I mean, come on.
Not likely. Not with the war still going on. NATO's got this open door policy, but nobody wants to commit to a timeline, especially not the US or Germany. They're worried about provoking Russia even more.
Yeah, I don't think Putin would take that too well. So what else is on the list?
Stronger air defenses.
Meaning?
He wants NATO countries to take a more active role in shooting down Russian missiles and drones over Ukraine.
Just getting pretty close to direct involvement in the conflict, though, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's a line most Western allies aren't willing to cross.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyway.
Right, too risky. So what's next? Surely he doesn't expect the West to just roll over on everything.
Well, this next one is even more contentious. He's asking for permission to use Western-supplied weapons to strike inside Russia.
Whoa, okay. Now that is a bold move.
It would be a major escalation if they agree to that. And I'm talking a major escalation. It would fundamentally change the West's involvement in this conflict.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's going to go over well with most NATO members. Too much risk.
Exactly. They're already worried about escalating things with Russia. This would just throw gasoline on the fire.
So no long-range missiles for Ukraine, then?
Don't think so. Especially not those German Taurus missiles. Zelensky's been asking for. Scholz has been really digging his heels in on that one.
Germany seems really hesitant to do anything that could be seen as provocation.
Which is interesting because other allies, like the UK and France, they've already sent long-range weapons.
Yeah, but they've been careful to say those weapons can't be used to attack targets inside Russia.
Exactly. It's a really fine line they're walking.
So it sounds like Zelensky's striking out on almost every request. What does he realistically hope to get out of this tour, then?
Well, there is one last thing on his list, and it's probably his best bet. He wants more investment in Ukraine's own arms industry.
So instead of just giving Ukraine weapons, they'd help Ukraine build its own.
Exactly. Make them less reliant on Western handouts in the long run.
That's a bold move for sure. What are the implications of that?
Well, for one, it would be a huge boost to Ukraine's defense industry. They'd be able to produce their own weapons and ammo, potentially even sell them to other countries.
And wouldn't that also benefit the countries supplying the technology and expertise?
Exactly. A win-win.
Yeah.
At least on paper.
Okay, so maybe not a total loss for Zelensky then, but this whole focus on arming up, how do you think Russia's going to react to all this?
Well, we're already seeing some signs of escalation. Russia just expelled a bunch of Romanian diplomats and closed down their embassy there.
Really? What prompted that?
Russia says it was in retaliation for Romania expelling some of their diplomats last month. But the timing is definitely interesting.
Yeah, especially with all this talk about a potential Ukrainian offensive in Transnistria.
Ah, yes, Transnistria. That's a whole other can of worms.
We'll have to unpack that another time. Transnistria. That one's not exactly front page news these days. I mean...
It's one of those places, you know, it's like, oh yeah, things could get out of hand really fast over there.
So we've got Zelensky on this whole give us more weapons tour, but then there's these reports coming from Italian and Spanish media saying he might be open to a ceasefire.
See, that's what I don't get.
Yeah.
Those countries aren't exactly known for being anti-Russia. Why are they the ones pushing for peace?
Right. It makes you wonder, what's their angle?
Maybe they're trying to gauge public opinion. Or test the waters for a peace deal. Who knows?
It's like everyone's playing 4D chess over there. Meanwhile, Zelensky's still talking about his big victory plan. You know, the one...
The super secret strategy that nobody's actually seen.
Yeah, that one. Except
Yeah.
for that little leak in the Times a while back.
Which his people immediately denied, of course.
Of course. It's all very hush-hush. So what do you think? Is this victory plan for real, or is it just a bunch of smoke and mirrors?
Honestly, probably a bit of both. Zelensky knows he can't win this war outright.
Yeah.
Not without risking a much wider conflict. But he also can't just give Putin everything he wants. He's got to look strong for his own people and for his allies.
And as long as he keeps dangling this victory plan, keeps everyone guessing, he maintains that sliver of hope.
Right, exactly. Keeps the West engaged, keeps the money and weapons flowing. It's a balancing act for sure.
Speaking of balancing acts, this whole Transnistria thing, that sounds risky, like really risky.
Oh, it would be a huge gamble. But it could pay off. Think about it. Russia's got troops stationed in Transnistria.
Yeah.
If Ukraine attacks, Russia has to divert troops and resources away from the main front.
A distraction
Yeah.
to relieve the pressure in the east.
Exactly. But it could also backfire big time. A direct clash between Ukrainian and Russian forces in Transnistria. That could easily escalate drag in other countries.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about a whole new war.
Yeah, not good. And let's not forget, every escalation means more fighting, more people dying. It's a terrible thing.
It is. And it just highlights how difficult Zelensky's position is. Every decision he makes has enormous consequences.
And then you've got this whole anti-sanctions movement gaining steam in Germany.
Right, the Stop the Sanctions crowd. They're saying the sanctions are hurting Europe more than they're hurting Russia.
And they're not entirely wrong. Those sanctions are having a real impact on the European economy.
Which is why this is such a headache for leaders like Scholz. They're trying to support Ukraine without completely tanking their own economies. It's a tough needle to thread.
So we've got Zelensky over here talking about peace talks and then hinting at new offensives. We've got Germany dealing with internal divisions over sanctions. And of course, we've got the U.S. election just a few weeks away.
Talk about a geopolitical thriller. It really is anyone's guess what happens next.
And we haven't even talked about the information war, because alongside the actual fighting, there's this whole other battle for hearts and minds.
Oh, absolutely. And Zelensky. He's a master at that. Remember those images from the beginning of the war? Zelensky in his olive green t-shirt, rallying his people. That was a turning point. He went from being a comedian to a wartime leader practically overnight.
Yeah, he knows how to play to an audience, that's for sure. But it's not just about looking good on camera, is it? There's a real strategy behind it.
Oh, absolutely. It's about controlling the narrative, keeping Ukraine's story front and center. Because let's face it, people's attention spans are short. They get tired of hearing about the same conflict day after day, especially when it's, half a world away.
And expensive. Let's not forget that wars are expensive, both in terms of actual money and, political capital.
Exactly. And we're starting to see that fatigue set in both in the US and in Europe. People are feeling the pinch of higher prices. They're starting to question whether all this support for Ukraine is really worth it.
Which is why Zelensky needs to keep reminding everyone what's at stake, right? This isn't just about Ukraine. It's about democracy versus authoritarianism, freedom versus tyranny. Those are his words, by the way.
He's very good at framing the conflict in those terms, and it's been very effective. But he can't just rely on those same old talking points. He needs to keep things fresh, keep the West engaged, because ultimately Ukraine's fate depends on that Western support.
So where do those peace talks fit into all of this? Are those real, or is it just a PR stunt?
Honestly, it's probably a bit of both. I think Zelensky knows he can't achieve all of his goals through military means alone. At some point, there's going to have to be a negotiated settlement.
But he can't look weak either.
Exactly. He can't give Putin everything he wants. He's got to show his own people and the West that he's still fighting for every inch of Ukrainian territory.
So by letting these rumors about peace talks circulate, he accomplishes two things. He reassures the West that he's not the one standing in the way of peace. And he puts pressure on Putin to come to the negotiating table.
Exactly. It's classic realpolitik, using every tool at your disposal to advance your interests.
It's enough to make your head spin. Zelensky's playing 4D chess over there, and we're all just trying to keep up.
That's a great way to put it. But that's what makes this whole situation so fascinating. Right? It's like a real-life thriller with huge stakes and no clear ending in sight.
And as we always say on the deep dive, it's important to understand the complexities of these issues, to look beyond the headlines, and to question everything.
Because the world is a messy, complicated place, and there are always multiple sides to every story.
And sometimes the truth is even stranger than fiction. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today, but don't worry, we'll be back next time with another deep dive into the most important stories of our time.
Until then,